Hello, welcome to Crip Campus. I'm Cindy Nover. I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Ryan Parrey. I use he, him pronouns. And how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's Disability Pride Month. I don't know if you have been keeping track of that, but right now on Canopy, which is a streaming service that I recommend to all of our listeners, if you have a university affiliation and they have Canopy, or you participate with your local library, it's even worth getting a library card to get Canopy. They have dozens of Disability Pride Month films streaming right now, so I've been watching some of those. So I just wanted to say happy Disability Pride Month, but today's episode is kind of about some challenges to disability rights. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily something to be proud of. Yeah, in the last several weeks, the internet is abuzz because the Department of Justice released a memo effectively about the implementation of the Olmstead law. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not even a policy person. So I'm going to get the words wrong. So I just said, well,
It's an act.
an act, exactly. So I should say what that is. So what that was a Supreme Court decision in 1999, right? That boiling it down, said, well, disabled people can and should, I hesitate to say have the right, but to live in the most integrated environment possible, which has since then been translated as often community-based living, or at the very least, being able to choose where they live. The Olmstead Act, right, was basically saying that not doing that, forcing them to live anywhere, or setting it up such that they can only choose to live in a handful of places, right? That itself is a form of discrimination.
Okay. And this is like, so I worked in mental health, community mental health with people who were in, we call them California boarding care homes. Here they're called adult family homes in Washington, but basically places where you have supportive living for people. In the case that I was working with, people with serious mental illness. But basically, the history of institutionalization for people with disabilities is long. And in the 20th century, for a variety of reasons, people became interested. I think there was some media exposure to what these institutions were like. There were various groups that were trying to draw attention to the conditions at these places, and there was typically just, I mean, for hundreds of years, the idea that any kind of a disability could be physical, could be mental. There were even times when a man could put his wife in an institution just by signing the paper, so it could be, fake. And so people were put in institutions kind of like no questions asked, right? And then not only throughout the 20th century did people try to draw attention to this, but this deinstitutionalization movement, at least from what I learned in school and from what I experienced when working with this population, someone as recently as Reagan said, we got to deinstitutionalize. We got to send people out into the community. And I think some of the reasons weren't entirely because we really love to see people with disabilities integrated into the community. I think there were some cost reasons and various other things, right? And so by the time I was working in these settings 20 years ago, I was regularly experiencing comments from the neighbors of the houses that I was working in saying that they didn't want these people there and couldn't they just go back to institutions. And so it wasn't necessarily like socially popular. I don't think it even is still, based on what I've experienced. And we do still have institutions. It's worth mentioning that, for example, Eastern State Hospital is an institution near us that does house people who I hesitate to say need to be institutionalized. But for example, there is a group of people there that are not guilty by reason of insanity, pleas for having committed crimes, right? And so that is an alternative to incarceration for those folks. So institutions do exist, but a lot of them closed, and the people went and lived in the community, right? So 1999 Olmstead Act comes after years of working toward deinstitutionalization, but we are not completely deinstitutionalized. And this act was important because, like you said, it doesn't guarantee the right exactly, but the most integrative environment possible is the goal when someone needs some support, right? Is that kind of your understanding of that history up through the Olmstead Act, even up until now?
It is. It's my understanding that deinstitutionalization efforts were happening, I'm going to say more grassroots, as early as the 70s, but It was, I think, for the popular imagination, Geraldo Rivera's big Willowbrook expose is what really broke things in the late 70s, early 80s. That's where he went to. The story I always heard is he told there was this massive institution for people with, well, disabilities in New York. I assume it's Willowbrook, New York. And
Staten Island, New York City.
oh, it's Staten Island. See, this, details. But what I always heard was Geraldo said, "Okay, I'll be there at noon to come inside and film inside and look around." And he showed up at 8, and it was just, I mean, you can watch video of it.
Yeah, it's online.
It's awful. It's awful. It looks like the Blair Witch Project. It looks just really dehumanizing and carceral, all of these things. Yeah, so I think that was that, and as you said, right, cost related issues. Yeah, made it more popular. And yeah, I mean, these days I have friends who are really involved with L'Arche, which is a community living situation. It's not I don't know that it's expressly a deinstitutionalization effort, but it certainly does provide that option, right? It's where people with intellectual disabilities and people without intellectual disabilities live together. And it is not a carer carry situation. It's just, hey, we all live together, we all contribute how we can to the house, to the communal living situation. And I mean, I know folks that they love it. It's great. And even so, you get those folks who are like, well, people might say, I love that. That's great. But I don't want it to be down the street from my house. Right.
Yes, they had people that I was neighbors to had a lot of concerns about the frequent cigarette smoking more than anything. And I would like to say that nicotine can mitigate some of the secondary symptoms of certain antipsychotic medication. Excuse me, and yeah, and even mitigate some of the symptoms of some mental illnesses. So, once upon a time in psychiatric hospitals, they used to give out cigarettes, like, as part of just what they gave out to people because it would calm them down and give them something to do. So, I'm not surprised that there's, like, that history, but the people in the neighborhoods where I worked thought that the people were scary and dangerous and smoked too much. And I would like to just put a plug in for basically, when you have somebody who's hearing voices, like somebody with schizophrenia, they're much more likely to harm themselves than they are to harm someone else. So if you're walking down the street and seems to be responding to internal stimuli, as we say, maybe just have some concern about whether they're okay, but don't necessarily assume that they're going to attack you. That sort of thing is extremely rare. But in popular media, we see a lot of movies implying that the voices told us to do X, Y, Z, or whatever, and that's really rare. But anyway, so we've talked a little bit about the history. What's going on now? What's the internet a buzz about?
Well, so again, I mean, what do they say? As of the time of this recording, about a month, yeah, the DOJ, Department of Justice, released this memo that effectively advised. It didn't say it was overturning the act or the decision. It talked about how what it wouldn't enforce, or suggested at the very least that it wouldn't go after the enforcement of the decision.
So
Because
if I'm institutionalized because someone is not following the rule to be more integrated, but somebody finds me to be, whatever, mentally ill or disabled in some way, and then they say, you have to go be in an institution, that's the part where this act would have stopped them from being able to make that decision. Would I have to go to court to sue them for having put me in an institution? And frankly, can I sue someone from an institution is another question I have.
right, I know of participatory action research where researchers will go in and work with people that are institutionalized about getting out, right? Whether that's through legal action or, I mean, financial, right? Not action, but financial situations. Yeah, I think it is also folks have worked to get out of institutions, but also to avoid being forced to live there. And we really are reaching the limits of my knowledge about the specifics, but Yeah, what you could do is say, "Hey, we want to have this community living situation," and I would imagine you could go and get funds for it and make it happen with Olmsted as the backbone of. Well, why is this important? Because it is, right? This non-restrictive, most integrated environment thing. It addresses the anti-discrimination of it all, and that the government enforced that for the last since 1999, more or less, mattered, right? Meant something. And if they're sending the message that we're not going to do that anymore, it doesn't necessarily change what the law says, what the act says, the language of it, right? Or even the intent, but it takes away all the teeth. To quote Dr. Sin from a few weeks ago, right? There's less teeth to the act.
Yeah. So when the Supreme Court decides, maybe I'm just getting back to like civics 101 or whatever, but when the Supreme Court decides something, it's not just magically implemented everywhere. There are other parts that maintain the enforcement of it or get people in trouble if they're not doing it. And so is this just, I mean, you don't know why this was issued, although that's my next question. I'm just sort of wondering out loud, like, is this a way to undo what the Supreme Court said, because without the enforcement arm, there's no point in the Supreme Court ruling. It's like, okay, congratulations, you have these rights, but nobody's going to help you defend them if we're not trying to enforce it.
Yeah. And I mean, a really suspicious person could imagine a not too distant future where the same a Department of Justice comes along or some lawmaker comes along and says, "Hey, ever since you stopped enforcing Olmsted, there's been less successful challenges to integrate it to institutionalization. I guess it's not a problem anymore. Let's forget
Yeah.
that." Right? And I think that's what people are worried about.
Yeah.
And as for why, yeah, no, I think no one said this that I know of. No one from the Department of Justice has said, but I can't imagine it's not very much tied up with the movement to be less diverse and inclusive.
Okay. So disability, when it's convenient for others, is considered an aspect of diversity, at least in this case, whereas sometimes we've been trying to get disability to be considered an aspect of diversity in other cases for a while. And so in your opinion, it's possible that nobody did crunch some numbers and decided that this was a cheaper way to go about things or something like that, but really rather just people with disabilities do not fit into what we want our society to look like, a non-diverse society. And so let's continue to use the law to make it so that we don't have that society. Like, but I mean, I guess if out of sight, out of mind, if people are ending up in institutions. So you don't think it was financial or it is political in the sense that I'll get more votes if I keep making diverse people go away, right? But it's not like a cost saving measure.
I mean, now you ask it like that, right? Again, a suspicious person would say, "Hey, we know that private prisons are a moneymaker. Well, institutions are also carceral spaces that could make a lot of money for the people running the places, making them and staffing them and making all of the food and other materials that the place uses, right? If they were privatized, which I
And that's really handy. I mean, because a public institution requires taxes to go to that, and so if I mean, it's in line with sort of a low tax philosophy. Because if things are privatized, then you don't have to ask the public for anything. You get these people that apparently they don't want their neighborhoods, in some cases, to go somewhere else, and people can personally enrich themselves. A suspicious person could think that those things were all tied together in that way.
yeah. I mean, you could. Yeah.
I can actually add a little something onto here because I followed a few Supreme Court rulings, and you're right in the sense that if there's no agency that's specifically there to enforce the rules, that institutions and other bad actors can temporarily get away with not helping out people who have disabilities. However, that does open those specific bad actors and the governments up to financial lawsuits, and it'll be more beneficial for the government to allocate agency assets or manpower to protect those specific rights of the people, because otherwise people get sued and the government gets sued, and there's only so much money the government has to be able to defend themselves. While it's still a lot, they're basically spending your tax dollars on defending themselves, whereas they could be spending your tax dollars on enforcing the law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's Jim Ryan, our producer, in case you all haven't heard from him in a few episodes. Thank you, Jim. So what's our takeaway from this, Ryan? Are we just letting the audience know that this is going on? What can the audience do? Why should anyone care? I assume our listeners would care about this, but like, what's our takeaway here?
I mean, I think I didn't know about it until I saw it on social media. I wasn't tracking Supreme Court or DOJ memos, but yeah, I think just know about it. Remember that it's important. I'm always reminded of, speaking of people with mental psychiatric impairments, I'm always reminded of a few years ago at a disability rights meeting where we live in Spokane, or where I live in Spokane. There's a big downtown bus depot, and lots of people are around there, including some people with mental illnesses or psychiatric impairments and other situations, right? And I remember at this meeting, one of the people was a disabled woman that was speaking very upsetly about those quote unquote crazy people down at the bus plaza. And she doesn't like them being there. And she felt scared and she felt unsafe and all of this. And I said a lot of things. And then another person in the group spoke up and said, "Hey, listen, I personally, hi, it's me, and I am 3 supportive family members and 2 weeks of medication away from being one of those people you're talking about at any minute. So, like, we're sitting here, we're having lunch, we're having our meeting, we're getting along. And yet, you talk about people who could be very much like me, right? So, I don't know, I bring that up because I think that gets to the issue, right? When we talk about the most integrative environment, right? We tend to think of, like you're saying, well, how is that going to threaten me? Or what costs is that going to give me personally, or my neighborhood, or my state, or the country? And that those questions, right, get away from and make it easier to ignore. No, well, these are also just people who probably, given the choice, would want to live their lives, would want to live where they want, how they want, with whom they want, right? So there isn't, I guess the call to action, right, is find out more about it and find out what you can do. Because I don't know. I still don't even know what I can do. But it's worth knowing about and looking into.
And I think one thing that you can do, one thing that we can all do when in environments like that is say something, right? So that person did say something, and so that's great. They spoke for themselves. But if they didn't, we can say something there. I remember when I was downtown near the infamous plaza that you just mentioned, where the buses go, there was a guy talking to himself, and this couple, they were kind of getting mad at him. They were like taking what I could see with my eyes, like kind of a hostile looking approach to him. And so I just went over to them, and I was like, "That guy's not he's not coming over to you. He's not harassing you. He's just doing his own thing." And then I offered to walk with the guy a little ways down because he was already walking, just to show them that I, a relatively physically small person who didn't have any apparent armor on or whatever, was capable of walking with this person and just chatting with him. I don't know if the person wanted me to walk with him, so I didn't go exactly too close to him, but I just sort of showed them that, like, you guys are walking down the street, me too, with this person, and it's all fine, and we all just live in a society. So I think challenging, because certainly stigma is one of the huge components of this, right? And that is something that we can address. It's probably one of the harder things to address, but it's something that we can all say something about. You don't want that person at the meeting to be in an institution, I assume, or that the other people at the meeting wouldn't want that person to end up in an institution, but we may want to let people know what the institutions are like as well, to whatever extent we're able to, verbalize that it's like being incarcerated, right? You have to go to these groups and you have a special room that you have to sleep in, and it's not like living in the house. So it's not great there. And these people don't need to go live somewhere else because these people are us, and vice versa, right?
Right. Right. I mean, yeah. exactly. I'm reminded again, or reminded of this. I can't remember her name, but there's a woman I knew who lived in a community living space. I was going to say group home. That's wrong. A community living space where she had staff who came in and would assist her and the other folks with, I don't know, various things. And just hearing her and other people too talk about, like, well, my staff this and that and the other thing, right? It's not my care provider or whatever, right? There's very much a sense of this is a work relationship and you work for me, right? And that's not the case in all of these situations, but it can be, right? That also reflects this more, well, those people are in charge of themselves and their home and all of this, right? Which is again just the opposite of a more institutional space where that's not at all the case, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the seminal books in my field, The Center Cannot Hold, is about a woman with schizophrenia who went on to become an academic and describes in the book the process of sometimes having to be institutionalized, et cetera, like during her time while she was studying. And then when I wrote my dissertation, one of the articles was about a program that, well, all three articles were about this program, but we implemented a program to help improve the physical health of people with what was called serious mental illness, like schizophrenia, for example. And I interviewed some people with serious mental illness about their experience in the program. And I published the article, and this was in 2013, and people were still contacting me shortly thereafter to be like, so wait, you talk to the people themselves about the things that they might want and that would be helpful for them. And that was like somehow groundbreaking because this book I mentioned, The Center Cannot Hold, was written in the 70s or something. And that was a person speaking about her own condition. And it was popular because it was like, wow, we never knew what they were thinking or what went on inside their heads, right? And then I also asked some of them, I'm doing this in quotes, of what they were thinking. And it was somehow in 2013 like, whoa, okay. Because then I did a systematic review about whether other people had done something like this. Very few articles were published where people were talking to the recipients of this care. So I think really thinking of people as being able to advocate for themselves, regardless of how they appear when they're interacting with you. They might be hearing voices and responding to them or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they can't know how many people they want to sleep in the same room with them and what foods they want to eat and how they want to spend the money that they receive, right?
Right. And I'm reminded of my friend Kate, who I want to get her on the show sometime. But it would have been around the same time as you were doing your dissertation, because we're old. I am.
Oh, wait, that's ageist. I am 46 and so proud of it. So if you meant that as a negative, I don't accept that.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
That's, I will be accountable for them. But then, sorry. So my friend Kate did this dyadic interviewing where she researched and talked and interviewed people with, I think primarily intellectual disabilities about their social entrepreneurship work. And she got a lot of pushback, I think, from IRB and well, mostly IRB committees saying, what do you mean you're going to talk to them? Like, you can't talk to them. And so what she did was, I remember, she would reach out to them and recruit. Those were her participants initially. And then they could pick one other person to speak with them and be interviewed separately about their perspective on this person's life and their work and whatever. And again, like you, right? It was just about asserting, like, no, these people have thoughts, feelings, preferences, opinions, whatever it is. And when we act like they don't, we're doing something negative, right?
We should do an episode about quote unquote protecting people with disabilities and IRB. I mean, related to higher ed, it would be relevant because it is true that it's very important to protect various people from having to talk about their inner life if they don't understand the risks and consequences of such research. And that doesn't mean we should get a no every time we try to talk to people about their lived experience because the gatekeepers are saying we can't do it. So anyway, another episode.
Yeah, we should write. I'll write that down. Yeah,
Okay.
you should do. That would be good. Well, and that again, I know. I think we want to move on, but But again, I think that goes back to why deinstitutionalization, right? Because it's assumed, or at least the rhetoric around it is, well, disabled people belong in those places because that's where they're going to get the care they need, right? And I think what a lot of folks who have come out of institutions or who are against them are saying is, well, no. I mean, at what cost, right? If that were true, at what cost? The cost is too high. The personal cost is too high. But also, if somebody needs help using the restroom or, getting dressed or making their food, that doesn't mean they need to be in an institutional setting where to make those things happen, they have to sit in a room with no decorations, wearing some generic clothing, if at all. One of the things you'll see in the Willowbrook video is a lot of these, there were hundreds of people and they weren't dressed. A bunch of them were not. They were just naked in rooms, in hallways, on gurneys. And I mean, this wasn't 100 years ago. This was the 80s or late 70s.
Right.
And yeah, I just worry that we think, oh, these places are great. But then, and no one ever goes inside. So we don't know. And like you said before, out of sight, out of mind. And maybe somebody's making money off of it too. So
Yeah. These are all things to keep in mind. Let's come back on the show at some point if we hear any actual lawsuits or some effects of this guidance, but we don't understand why it was issued. We have some suspicious person speculations. And in the meantime, we can stay tuned to what happens with it and how we promote the idea of integration over segregation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for tuning in to our Disability Pride Month episode. I think we might actually have another one coming up before the month is over. It was lovely to talk to you today, Ryan. I'll see you next time.
Love you. See you then.